Welcome to Talks with Dr. Gupta and friends. Today we provide a strictly facts-driven assessment of the state of play in the 2026 Iran war, examining the strategic balance of power and military realities on the ground. The campaign launched by the United States and Israel, designated Operation Epic Fury, has settled into a high-intensity grinding stalemate. Despite over 13,000 US and Israeli airstrikes, the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, initial damage to nuclear facilities, and the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the conflict has not produced regime change in Tehran. Instead, the military arena is defined by severe attrition. Iran responded to Western bombardment by launching over 2,200 ballistic missiles and 4,400 autonomous drones across the region. These strikes damaged high-value American assets, including an E-3 Sentry early warning aircraft, multiple KC-135 refueling tankers, and key radar stations across the Persian Gulf. In Iraq, pressure from pro-Iranian militias forced US forces to evacuate Camp Victory in Baghdad. At sea, Iran has maintained effective control over the Strait of Hormuz, using drone swarms, fast boats, and naval mines, creating a chokehold on global energy shipping. Assessing who is winning versus who is receding requires separating tactical strikes from strategic outcomes. The Western-Israeli coalition is receding strategically. While achieving tactical destruction, Washington and Tel Aviv have severely depleted their critical air defense stockpiles, expending 50 to 80% of THAAD interceptors and roughly half of their Patriot missile reserves. Operating expensive interceptors against $15,000 mass-produced drones has exposed an unsustainable cost-exchange ratio. Furthermore, erratic messaging and ambiguous war aims from Washington have undermined diplomatic leverage and market stability. Conversely, Iran has demonstrated strategic resilience. The Iranian population has suffered catastrophic infrastructure destruction, civilian losses, and severe economic strain. However, the state survived decapitation. Power transitioned smoothly to a technocratic, nationalist class of second and third generation IRGC officers under Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Crucially, foreign bombardment did not trigger a popular uprising. Instead, it mobilized domestic public sentiment around national defense and state survival. Welcome back to part 2 of Talks with Dr. Gupta and friends. Now let's examine the multi-country escalation dynamics and the rising risk of tactical nuclear proliferation. The risk of broader regional and global escalation remains dangerously elevated. Arab Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain, have absorbed direct collateral damage from Iranian missile and drone strikes, targeting energy facilities and hosting bases. While frustrated by Washington's inability to shield their infrastructure, these nations remain dependent on US air defense systems, leaving them caught in a volatile security trap. Simultaneously, regional proxy networks have re-engaged. The Houthis in Yemen have resumed maritime blockades in the Red Sea, while Iraqi militias continue targeted strikes on US regional installations. On the global stage, China has deepened its economic and strategic alignment with Tehran by continuing to absorb Iranian crude exports through non-Western pipelines. Beijing has neutralized Western naval blockades and integrated Iran deeper into a multipolar economic framework. This environment creates an acute risk regarding tactical nuclear capabilities. Iran's new technocratic leadership has concluded that conventional air defenses and diplomatic agreements fail to guarantee sovereignty against Western strikes. With its conventional infrastructure heavily damaged and past treaties dismantled, Tehran's strategic calculus has shifted decisively toward nuclear weaponization as its ultimate non-negotiable deterrent. On the Western side, as conventional interceptor stockpiles run dangerously low and global energy markets suffer from the Strait of Hormuz blockade, policymakers face a narrowing window of conventional options. When conventional military tools fail to force compliance, the risk of doctrine shifting toward extreme escalation or tactical nuclear force increases exponentially. In part 3 of our talks with Dr. Gupta and friends, we outline the requirements for a diplomatic halt and analyze the upcoming electoral consequences for Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Halting this conflict requires moving away from maximalist rhetoric toward concrete, verifiable diplomatic off-ramps. First, Washington must eliminate ambiguous war aims and establish explicit, consistent red lines rather than oscillating between regime change demands and sudden ceasefires. Second, international stakeholders must establish a formal multilateral security framework for the Strait of Hormuz, modeled on established international maritime conventions like Suez or Malacca, to guarantee open commercial transit. Third, any lasting truce requires a comprehensive, multi-front ceasefire that simultaneously addresses hostilities across Gaza, Lebanon, and the Persian Gulf. Finally, Western powers must offer tangible, permanent sanction relief in exchange for verifiable limits on Iranian nuclear enrichment, recognizing that economic strangulation only reinforces Tehran's resolve. If the war continues or ends in a bitter stalemate, the domestic political fallout for both American and Israeli leadership will be severe. In the United States, Donald Trump faces critical midterm elections in November 2026. Public opinion polls indicate that 68% of Americans view the war as not worth fighting, with presidential approval slumping into the mid-30s. In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu faces a decisive national election scheduled for October 27, 2026. While Netanyahu gambled on wartime security to consolidate power, he faces broad voter fatigue, public anger over post-October 7 vulnerabilities, ongoing corruption trials, and fierce political battles over military exemptions for ultra-Orthodox citizens. Without an absolute military victory or regime change in Tehran, an indecisive, costly war leaves Netanyahu politically exposed against a unified opposition alliance. In modern conflict, tactical firepower cannot substitute for clear strategy. Without binding diplomacy, both regional stability and political legacies remain on the line. Welcome to final part of our talks with Dr. Gupta and friends. We examine the broader geopolitical horizon, how this regional war risks drawing in global superpowers, specifically China and Russia, and what that means for global escalation. Russia, while heavily engaged in its own war in Europe, has increasingly integrated its strategic interests with Tehran. Moscow provides Iran with advanced satellite intelligence, electronic warfare capabilities, and air defense technical support in exchange for Iranian tactical drones and ballistic missile production know-how. For Russia, a prolonged US military entanglement in the Persian Gulf serves as a major strategic advantage, depleting Western interceptor stockpiles, diverting Washington's political focus, and straining NATO's logistics networks. China's involvement represents an even more critical vector for global escalation. Beijing has acted as Iran's ultimate economic backstop, continuing to purchase Iranian crude oil and utilizing non-Western financial clearing systems to render US naval blockades and economic sanctions ineffective. Furthermore, as Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi highlighted following high-level meetings in Beijing, China views a resilient post-conflict Iran as a vital strategic partner in securing Eurasian trade routes and countering American regional power. The risk of direct global escalation stems from two interconnected triggers. First, the industrial depletion trap, as the United States and its allies burn through critical precision munitions, air defense interceptors, and naval assets in the Middle East. The global military balance shifts. If Western defense stockpiles are exhausted in the Gulf, Western deterrence in the Indo-Pacific and Eastern Europe is severely eroded, potentially tempting major powers to act on territorial ambitions elsewhere. Second, the maritime and AI tech friction. Should Western forces target Chinese energy shipments or sanction Chinese firms directly involved in supplying dual-use components or computing hardware to Tehran, the conflict could spill over into direct economic and military confrontation in the Indo-Pacific. What began as a regional conflict is rapidly evolving into a high-stakes proxy war between competing global blocs. If major powers move from economic and intelligence support to direct military intervention, the world faces a shift from localized warfare to a fully fragmented, multi-theater global confrontation. Thank you for watching Talks with Dr. Gupta and friends. Stay sharp, stay informed, and let's keep analyzing the forces shaping our world.